Good afternoon. My name is Evan Hawkins, and I have the distinct honor and privilege of serving as the IPS School Board President. I want to thank each of you for joining us this afternoon for the IPS ESSER funding discussion hosted by the IPS Board of School Commissioners, as well as the IPS leadership team. During these next 90 minutes, the majority of our conversation will focus on the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, known as ESSER. This fund, under the Federal CARES Act, provides much needed financial support to school systems to address the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, the impacts that it has had and continues to have on elementary and secondary schools across this nation. Before we get started, I have some housekeeping information to share. Today's virtual town hall is being translated in real time for our Spanish-speaking families. To access the Spanish version, please click the interpretation button at the bottom of your Zoom screen and choose Spanish. We ask that attendees do not record or live stream any virtual or in-person ESSER town hall meetings. Today's session will be recorded by the district and uploaded to the IPS website later this week. In addition, we ask that all participants approach this conversation with an open mind, as all input and feedback is incredibly valuable and should be respected. Participant feedback will be received during the breakout sessions later in this meeting, which is designed to be collaborative. And finally, before we dive into our agenda, I'd like to turn it over to Superintendent Alicia Johnson to provide a quick moment of reflection of the 2020-21 school year.
Thank you, President Hawkins. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for making time in the midst of your day to join us for what I hope will be a great conversation with lots of ideas generated as we think about the work we have ahead of us. So wanted to take a minute before we hopped into talking about the 2021 or 21-22 school year to talk a little bit about what we accomplished during the 2021 year. As you are all well aware, it was a quite disruptive year and presented lots of challenges for school systems across America to figure out how to address. As we went into the work last summer, we were really focused in three main areas. So non-negotiables around the safety of our students and staff, around the academic experience we wanted our students to still receive, and then the financial and operational criteria and things that we knew we were going to have to consider in terms of meeting the immediate needs and balancing it with the long-term sustainability of the district. And really, that's a question we'll be asking you all to chime in on today. Next slide. So just a few things for you all to know that we were able to accomplish over the course of this year. I will not read this slide to you, but in terms of our celebrations around safety protocols, we're proud of the work we were able to do in terms of safety with PPE available to our students, to our staff, with the additional sort of retinkering of our transportation strategy to support distancing on our school buses and additional monitors to ensure things like seating charts so that we could contact trace efficiently were in place, and then having a very robust protocol for contact tracing and quarantining when those occasions did arise over the course of the year. So you can just see by the numbers some of the work that had to be done to make sure that we were keeping our staff and our students safe over the course of the last year. It's really remarkable when you think about all that went into those efforts. In terms of our academic strategy, we were remote fully, we were hybrid, and we were fully in person. We did it all this past year and in and out of all those different modes of learning for our students. So a big thank you for our families who are on this meeting today, for the ways in which you stepped in to support during this time. I know that was no easy task. And a huge thank you to our staff, particularly our teachers who in many cases were teaching concurrently, meaning teaching kids who are online and students who are in person at the same time. That is no easy feat, but I'm really proud of the way that we came through the year. We started the year prioritizing our most vulnerable students. So even when we were all remote, we still stood up learning hubs for our students who qualified for those housing services who were designated as homeless. so they could be in a safe and supported environment if their families chose that for them. So you can see 4 transitions over the course of the year, 4 learning hubs that were operating during the course of the year, and feedback that we received from our families who are fully virtual, with 70% of them saying that they had an effective experience even when their child was in the remote environment. So again, it was quite the challenge and quite the roller coaster, but we do celebrate what we were able to accomplish this year. And finally, as it relates to finances and operations, really proud that usually an effort that would take multiple years, moving to become a one-to-one district, we were able to make that happen in a matter of months to ensure that every single one of our students not only had a device, but also had access to a hotspot or mobile internet service if they needed it in their home, so they could access teaching and learning. And we're proud of the ongoing collaboration that all of our teams are doing to support continuing in the long term to have that one-to-one structure. So that's not something that we're just doing in a COVID context. That is something that will continue to be integrated into a part of the teaching and learning experience in Indianapolis Public Schools. So nearly 30,000 Chromebooks, nearly 13,000 nearly 10,000 hotspots, and then nearly 13,000 iPads to make sure our students had what they needed to learn in this past year. So next slide. So while we all know the year has been challenging, we are all, I am sure, still processing the trauma of the year, still grieving the losses that we experienced. We do know, because of the efforts of our team, our staff, our families, the community rallying around the district, that there are things to celebrate and there are things to build from. And so we're excited about this conversation because now we can pivot to start to think about where do we build from this year, from the successes that we experience, from the fact that we know we can be nimble and flexible when we need to be, so that we go into this next year working together with an eye to rebuilding our district in a stronger and more impactful way. So excited again to listen and to learn this afternoon. I think I am turning it back over to Commissioner Hawkins.
Excellent. Thank you, Superintendent Johnson, for that incredible reflection. And we all know there's just so much to celebrate here at IPS. So thank you again for that. So the purpose of this afternoon's town hall is really to provide a collective understanding of ESSER and gather your input, community input, about how the money can be used throughout the district. First, we'll take a few minutes to review the district's 2025 strategic plan. Then we'll walk through what ESSER even is and how funds can be used and its overall impact. We'll then be placed into virtual breakout rooms for small group discussions to gather your ideas on how to use ESSER funds that align with the 25 strategic plan. Participants will use the electronic ESSER note catcher to capture their thoughts and ideas. More details will be provided a little bit later in the program on the note catcher. Finally, we'll look at the trending suggestions from the breakout groups and discuss next steps. So I'm going to pause here and turn over the presentation to my colleague and friend, Will Pritchard, to talk about IPS's vision, mission, and 25 strategic plan.
Thank you, President Hawkins. At IPS, we believe all students can achieve their full potential, learn at high levels, and graduate prepared to succeed in school, career, and life. We're committed to ensuring that every student in every neighborhood receives the education and opportunities they deserve. This philosophy is the foundation for the district's strategic plan, which was unveiled earlier this year. At IPS, we provide a family of excellent public schools in which every student has the opportunity to succeed and has the power to create their own future. The district also empowers and educates all students to think critically, creatively, and responsibly, to embrace diversity, and to pursue their dreams with purpose. Before we dive into the strategic priorities, let's take a look at our 5 core values. To create these values, we listened to our students, teachers, principals, and community members over the past few years via surveys and town halls, ongoing stakeholder meetings, and through constant communication. We've narrowed in on values that will drive our actions through 2025 and beyond. These values are students first, racial equity, continuous improvement, integrity, and fifth, community. All 5 values are aligned closely with our 2025 strategic priorities. Strategic priority number 1, increase access to rigorous curriculum and instruction. When we say we're increasing access to rigorous curriculum and instruction, we mean that we're building safe, engaging, and socially, emotionally supportive learning environments that ensure access to high-quality instruction. We believe this matters because every child deserves access to grade-appropriate assignments, strong instruction, deep engagement, and teachers who hold high expectations. Strategic priority number 2, promote racial equity. At IPS, this means that we strengthen and expand racial equity work to eliminate opportunity gaps, align policies and talent decisions, and interrupt and address institutional bias. This matters because at IPS, we're committed to creating a district where student outcomes cannot be predicted by race and ethnicity, by correcting practices that perpetuate opportunity gaps and institutional racism. Strategic priority 3, foster authentic engagement. IPS equips and engages families, team members, and the community in authentic and inclusive partnerships. We believe this matters because supporting students to lead lives of purpose and choice is a community responsibility. When schools, families, and community members are engaged and work together, students are more successful. Strategic priority 4, operate and fund strategically. At IPS, this means we strengthen the quality, efficiency, and equity of central office services and resource allocation decisions. This matters at IPS because we have a moral imperative to ensure that we spend every dollar, no matter how limited the resources, across our schools in a way that's transparent, fair, and based on the needs of the students we serve to maximize opportunities. In addition to our core values and strategic priorities, IPS is pursuing a strategic framework to inform our ESSER investments, including investing in student learning, evolving the district's IT infrastructure for 21st century learning, and investing in facilities and operational costs, and prioritizing investments that promote student and staff safety. As you can see, this work is intensive. You all are valued partners on this journey. That's why you are here with us right now. As we embark on a long-awaited summer and plan for the 2021-22 school year, a major part of our work will revolve around the district's resources and the most efficient ways to utilize those resources. For a look at this 2025 strategic plan, visit our website at myips.org. At this time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Andrew Strope, IPS's Chief of Strategy and Planning, who will review ESSER and how the funds can be used. Andrew.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Pritchard. So going to cover just a few slides on what is ESSER as we really gear up to hear from you all on how to best utilize the investment. So just some key information on what it is. ESSER stands for the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, and it is a federal fund. So this is was pushed through Congress. There are 3 different rounds, but it is set to provide emergency relief to address the impact of COVID-19 and has had, continues to have on elementary and secondary schools across the nation. There are some guidelines on how it can be used. It can be used for learning acceleration, preparing schools for reopening and testing, repairing and upgrading projects to improve air quality in school buildings, and then some flexible use to allow for any activity currently allowed under federal education law. And what has the impact been on IPS for ESSER? So as you can see in this table, on the far left-hand column, where it's light blue, there have actually been 3 rounds of ESSER. Another term for this is a CARES Act. You also might hear people talking about stimulus funds. Those are all kind of terminology that's been used to designate ESSER. Again, these are federal dollars, but we actually received the ESSER 1 or the CARES Act in March 2020. So right as we were preparing to open up or to think about what school would look like this current school year. And so we received about $17 million there. And then ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 both came down the pipeline this past school year. One in December is when it was passed in Congress, and the other one in March of 2021. And so you can see some of the related dollar amounts there, ESSER 2 being 60.5 million and ESSER 3 being 136 million. So at the bottom of the screen, you can see kind of the total impact on IPS, and then also on our partners at our Innovation Charter Network schools. And so I think another key element here is, when do the dollars need to be spent by? This will be really, really important to think about as we consider what the investments could look like, what does sustainability look like. But these dollars do need to be spent within a certain time. They are time bound. And so they need to be spent really by September of 2023, September of 2024. And so that really does limit, the use in terms of how we can think about utilizing these dollars. We can't extend this over a long period of time. It's just, the next couple of years really to try to accelerate learning from COVID. And so that's really important to think about, as we start to really brainstorm what some projects ideas might look like. A little bit more on ESSER and then how that relates to financial sustainability here at IPS. I'm going to turn it over to our Chief Financial Officer, Weston Young, to go through that just a little bit. Weston?
Thank you, Andrew. Good afternoon, everybody. The first slide highlights, again, some of the uses and the plans that we've done this school year in response to really address and to stabilize our environment for safety. We also have plans, and we're executing at this time our summer school expansion. So more kids are in summer school this year. And then also just the retention of staff and hiring of staff to make sure that we have the academic supports for this school year heading into next year as well. When we see the acronym ESSER on this slide, there's two E's. One's education, the other is emergency. And so what we're wrestling with is emergency response and emergency funds, while at the same time, the district and many other districts in the state have been wrestling with remaining sustainable in the current funding landscape at the state and local level. And alongside the emergency funds that have become available to districts, IPS and many other districts are working with FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, to address some of those needs. There's also people who have come alongside us as partners, some longtime partners, and also some that are new to the support of IPS and other districts through philanthropy. We're very grateful for the IPS Foundation and many other partners that have come alongside us during this time. There's also ESSER funds that were made available through the governor's office, and IPS has benefited from that. And also many other state learning grants through the most recent legislative session have been made available, and IPS students are being supported for that. So a lot of funding opportunities for others to support the students of IPS. But we need to step back a little bit. And for 5-6 years, we've been raising the call to our board and to the community that to be competitive and have the best resources available for students, many of it being the human aspect of it, the people business that we are in, is getting the best and retaining the best people to support both the schools and the operations. And we've done that in the recent years. And in order to sustain that, not necessarily in emergency response, but in the long-term sustainability standpoint, we've had to be looking at our transportation, our operations, our facilities, our IT structure, our utilities, all of that to be not impacting the school environment in a negative manner. And so what this slide has been doing is framing up the conversation that if the what the cash balance does over the course of time, it runs out of money. And if we do some improvements, whether it be an additional source of revenue or reduction in cost, the green line is represented. But what we ultimately are after is that purple line, where we're able to sustain the work that we do, meet our goals in a sustainable way, and have our cash balance always be at a reasonable level, 8 to 10%, at least 1 month in reserves. That's our goal. And so whether it's the emergency response or it's our long-term financial outlook, we're looking at sustainability all the while through this response. And the last slide really highlights again what Andrew and Alicia and our board has represented, that ESSER must be spent. It's one-time monies, and it's up to us as a community, and we're seeking your insight, your input on how best to utilize those dollars. And again, the decisions we make as a community will have long-term ramifications on our long-term financial sustainability. So look forward to having the engagement during our breakout sessions, and thank you for participating today. And at this time, we're going to turn it over to Dr. Morgan, our Chief of Academics Officer, to share some of the big bets on the academic strategies that we're currently thinking about and putting in place.
Thank you, Weston, and good afternoon, everyone. Just as my colleagues have been describing, ESSER is really important for helping support our district, for supporting our students and our teachers. And I want to talk a little bit about the impact of COVID, as you all know, but specifically the impact that it has had on all of our scholars and our students. So if you look at, first we want to talk about unfinished learning. NWEA is one of the tests that our students take. And when we looked at the assessment that our students took this past year during COVID, compared to the last time they took it prior to COVID happening, though English language arts was an area that was pretty level or compared to what students did prior to COVID, we did see that math dropped. And so this showed that students' instruction has been impacted by this. And this is not just a trend that has happened here in IPS, this is something that is happening nationwide. And so we really want to make sure that we are supporting our students with instruction. We also know the impact that COVID has had on students' social emotional learning. We know that this year has, students may have experienced fear, anxiety, stress, uncertainty. All of these things impact how students show up to schools. And we want to make sure that we are providing that support as well. And then finally, we know the economic hardship that this has caused families. There have been families that have experienced unemployment, issues with housing, even food. All of these things impact how our students show up to school. And it is our job as educators to make sure that we are providing the holistic supports that our students need. And we are so grateful for ESSER for allowing us to do this. And so I want to talk a little bit about our theory of action around how we are utilizing funds to support that holistic experience that I was just referring to. So we have a theory that if we purchase on grade level curriculum and support for our students in all of the core subject areas, then we will be able to support teachers with really understanding and internalizing that curriculum to teach it well. Then finally, our students will have access to daily grade level content every day, no matter what IPS school they attend. So headline, we want to make sure every school has high quality curriculum that is taught well across our entire district. There are a couple of things that we are also looking at. So a few big bets that we're making within our academic strategy. One, we're purchasing that new consistent rigorous curriculum that I was referring to, specifically focusing in on our English language arts and literacy. We are also building in specific time for our teachers to understand the curriculum, and we're utilizing time this summer and throughout the year to make sure that teachers have the professional development and resources necessary to teach the curriculum. And we're also paying teachers for that time as well. And then finally, we're providing teachers with coaching and support, extra organizations that are going to be coming in to work with our teachers. These are national organizations that have training and support already necessary, that have shown that they've actually been able to increase student achievement in other areas. And we want to bring that to our teachers so that our teachers are being taught by the best so that they can teach our students in the best way possible. Next slide. So we know that even if we just focus in on the instructional component, there's so many other areas that our students need help. And this shows up within our strategic plan. Within our strategic plan, we are ensuring that our students have access to the social emotional learning supports that they need. We're also looking at high school redesign. We're also looking at ways that we can accelerate learning for the time that was lost in this past year. And this is everything from our facilities, from the way we communicate with families, and then also just making sure that the digital infrastructure within our buildings is up to par and supporting the one-to-one instruction that will continue on in future years. So these are all the things that we're looking at, and it is embedded within our strategic plan. So these are some of the things we're already starting to think about as we know that we have these supports that we want to make sure we're providing to our students and our teachers to accelerate learning within this year. I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague, Andrew Strope, back over to him.
Get this back up. Okay. So we should be good now. So, so we've talked a little bit about what ESSER is, a little bit about our strategic plan and academic strategy. And so now is when really want to spend the bulk of our time here, the rest of our time, kind of hearing from you. And so how this will go, and you don't have to memorize all of this. I'm just going to kind of set this up, and then we'll have team members in each group that'll kind of walk you through this. But we're going to set this up kind of like a think, pair, share. And so those of you that have been in the classroom, this is something you do often with groups of students or in a classroom to have a little bit of time to think and brainstorm, a little bit of time to pair up or as a team or as a table, kind of talk about some trends, and then want to share out to the larger group so we can capture some of those trends. And so that's how we're going to structure this. There will be a note catcher. So as soon as you get put into a group, there's nothing you need to do. You're going to be put in a group here in just a few minutes. We will have an IPS team member that's going to share their screen that has an electronic note catcher that will essentially just ask you to let's brainstorm some ideas for how we can utilize these dollars. So as you share ideas, kind of spaghetti at the wall kind of ideas, they're going to take notes so that everybody can kind of see what ideas are being thrown out. And then we'll ask to take about the next 15 minutes and see if there are any trends from the group and see if we can go a little bit deeper. And so that really, as we think about things we talked about, like sustainability, like groups of students that we might be able to serve with these dollars, those are the things that we're going to ask them, to go a little bit more deeper. So we're going to start really broad. We're going to try to zoom in a little bit, and then we'll bring them back together as a full group and kind of go team by team and say, kind of what'd you talk about? What were some of the trends? Again, we're going to be taking notes throughout. So there is no, kind of bad or wrong answer or idea here. We just want to hear from you. We want you to brainstorm. And again, you will have a team member who will be sharing their screen so that they can kind of walk you through that. A couple of things to think about as you are, brainstorming is what's on the left-hand side of this column here is, kind of really wanting to make sure we're focusing on what our students need. So as Dr. Morgan shared, right, we've got students and staff, we've got a core value that highlights students first. So really trying to think about, what might our students need? And of course, definitely want to hear your perspective on that. The second point, just as we're kind of thinking through this, is how can we prioritize academic achievement? So that is one of the core elements of ESSER and of the stimulus dollars, is how can we accelerate that learning? Dr. Morgan mentioned some ways we're already planning on doing that, but we definitely want to hear from you on some additional ways. The third bucket there is how can we spend the money sustainably? So as Weston mentioned, we do have to utilize these dollars by September of 2024. So that puts us on a pretty quick timeline. And there are some different ways to think about sustainability there, but we'd love to hear from you on that. And then also the fourth bullet point, if you can, be as specific as possible. So the more specific you are, the easier it will be for us on the back end to, again, make sure we're taking these notes. But then as we start to plan over the next couple of years, that if you can be specific, that will really, really help. This is just an example of what that note catcher is going to look like, that the IPS colleague or facilitator will share their screen. So again, as you go into the small group, they'll have directions for you, but you're going to just take about 10 minutes, brainstorm, share as many ideas as you can. We'll take those notes on the screen, and then you'll try to go a little bit deeper with some trends. And then we'll come back to full group to talk through those. So we should be good to transition. So Chris, if you want to set up the small groups, if you can be patient, you should be seeing that come across your screen in just a few seconds here.
Everybody should be back in from the breakout rooms now.
All right, great. Thanks, Chris. And it's good to see. I'm seeing some faces start to reemerge here from the groups. So thanks again for engaging and diving in. We want to take the last, or about 10 minutes here, so about one-ish minutes per group. There are 7 groups, to just hear what kind of some of the trends were from your group. So I'm gonna kind of go by. I'm gonna name kind of our IPS colleague who was facilitator, and then hopefully I'll talk through who might want to share out. But as you're sharing out, just keep it to about a minute if you can, and then we're going to be jotting down the notes as you share. But hopefully, and I was looking at some of the note catchers as the teams were rolling through, some really great ideas. So again, thank you very much for engaging. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about what your group talked about here. So Dr. Henderson, if we'll go ahead and start with your group, if there was either yourself or somebody in your group that wants to share out just some top level trends of what you discussed, that'd be great.
Thank you. Our group picked me. And so we'll start with one that we recognized as having some internal colleagues in the group that we thought would be a really good focus area around SEL for teachers and staff and the wellness of our adults who also, have gone through a traumatic year. We know that we do name that specifically for students. And so we know that our adults who are mentally and physically healthier will, be at their best level for completing their job functions at a greater capacity, which should contribute to improved student outcomes. We also surfaced, thanks to a couple of people who participated in our Finish Strong campaign, that there was a need to engage some of our families more. And so for our non-native English speakers, how can we increase the translation services for those families so that they can engage more in their child's educational experience and share with the school if there are things that they need to know that can help them learn better, but also will help them reinforce at home. And then the thought about how we can help with retention and performance and job satisfaction with teachers. And so perhaps increasing mentorship from just our first year novice teachers, but even teachers who are still on the shorter end or have fewer years of experience so that they will stay with us in IPS and we can continue to benefit from some of our investment of their coaching and training, as Dr. Morgan mentioned, with some of our academic strategy.
Great, thank you very much for sharing. Dr. Morgan, your group up next.
Sure, and we did not get a chance to select anyone, but I can either turn it over to someone or I can go over the high level standpoint. The group can decide. Well, hearing none, I'll go through these really quickly. So our group really came up with a lot of different suggestions of things that we should really be looking at. There were a couple of areas that we really wanted to hone in on. One was really around social emotional learning and just thinking about the whole child experience. How are we thinking about students' mental health, their wellness, and then also like extracurricular activities outside of the instructional standpoint? And so there were some strategies that the team started to think about. Also some partnerships that we would really want to think around bringing communities within schools, or the community schools model, one that has been in IPS before, but bringing it back to really support that. And so there was some great thought and discussion there. There was also some discussion around how we can leverage either partnerships or other push-in services into the classroom. So this idea of classroom assistants, what would it look like if there was a classroom assistant in every classroom? To really support teachers with the instructional standpoint, as well as this whole child experience that we were talking about. The final thing I'll state is we had a very healthy discussion around sustainability. All of these things that we discussed cost, it costs. And right now we do have ESSER, but ESSER will only be around for a certain amount of time. And we wanted to make sure that whatever we choose, we can think about the sustainability. And so there was a healthy discussion around that, but then also the discussion and need around us potentially lobbying for some policy implications and from both the state level as well as the federal level of resources we may need to think about what funding looks like beyond ESSER, the ESSER timeline. And that was all from our group.
Great, thank you, Dr. Morgan. And of course, we'll don't have to keep this as structured. So if a team member is sharing and they've missed an item that you really want us to hear about, definitely go ahead and jump in. Jamie, your group next.
Yep, Nicole and Justin are going to share.
Great.
Yeah, hi everybody. We had a lot of great ideas. One that we dove into a little bit more was just the idea of adding additional resources and support actually in the classroom that can really help focus at the individual one-on-one level with the students. So addressing really just the reality and the need of like a catch up and being able to help get kids back on track from where they should be from a learning perspective. Based on their age and where they are. So one of the ideas we talked about was just how critical that need is for ninth graders. And then truly creating it as a flexible model to be able to make sure resources can go, whether it's from school to school, grade to grade, and have a lot of input from the teachers and principals of what they truly need to be able to collectively help their whole class get better. So I'll pause. That's as quick as I can do, 30 seconds, Jamie.
The other thing that we talked about was the importance of really tracking progress and making sure that whatever ESSER is used for, that IPS can walk away with clear data around how it's helped students accelerate, and also make sure that they're tying that acceleration directly to the strategies that worked. In the event that there does need to be advocacy later around continuing investments, having that data to say, we invested in this, look at the gains that it made for students, we need to keep this going, having that data. The other thing that we mentioned was making sure that from a data tracking standpoint, that parents are partners in this as well, and making sure that that whatever data system is set up to really track progress through ESSER investments, that parents are a partner in that. They can see progress from their kid, step one all the way through the end of the ESSER investment. So that's it for me.
Great. Nicole, Justin, great, thank you. Good to see both of you. We'll transition to Sarah, your group.
Lindsay is going to share for our group.
Great.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay. I'm a mom of 3 at School 39. One of the biggest themes that emerged in our group was just wanting to really make sure that these funds are meeting actual felt needs of individual teachers and schools throughout the district. And so we had the idea that each school could be given a block of funds that teachers can then apply for as a kind of grant. A teacher who has an idea for something that he or she needs in their classroom, or maybe they've got a unique idea for engaging parents in some way, that they could apply with a project idea and get some of that money to put towards their own classroom and their own needs. And actually, we wanted to make sure that that money was not only for teachers, but anyone on staff at the school, whether that's a social worker who might have an idea that supports that social emotional learning piece, or maybe even an equity issue in their particular school, that they could apply for funding and make sure that money is really going to those really felt needs. And we thought that perhaps there could even be like a phase 1 and a phase 2, so that teachers could have some of that money at the start of the school year to get their classrooms or their school set up well, but that as the school year goes on and they have a better sense of what the needs are this year in their school, they might have another opportunity to apply later in the school year as well. So that was one of our big ideas.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay, and thanks for your engagement after a long year. So definitely thank you for all that you do and joining us here. Mindy, your group next.
Sorry, I can barely see my unmute button. I think I'm going to present because we were still in the brainstorming phase, so I didn't assign anyone. a lot of what other folks have talked about. We did talk about some sort of scaling of the racial equity work that's being done in buildings, sort of not reinventing the wheel, but share things that are working and sort of grow that exponentially. We talked some about focusing in on the math work, and some sort of supplemental or catch-up math program, whether it's tutoring or we're outsourcing with a partner or doing it with volunteers, but just sort of focused in on those data outcomes, the concern around that. Also sort of investing in things that will help our long-term financial sustainability around operations. So funding any studies for planning on school infrastructure, repurposing all that's IT infrastructure. So we had an ops person in our group, which was great. We had a long conversation about that. We talked a lot about mental health services, and a little bit about just in general wellness and physical wellness, and potentially some sort of survey or screening on how COVID has impacted our families and students. So whether it's loss of income or social structures or actual death. And then sort of thinking around increasing the need to focus on academics, and also the need to increase playtime and maybe PE time. And could we sort of use some dollars to fund, our AYS, things that already exist, so partnerships that already exist, our AYS programs, our YMCA programs, so that more families have access to those before and after care services that make them, potentially more supplemental or focused on physical health across the district. And then again, investing in teachers, training, education, and increasing their skills. I think some of the stuff that Dr. Morgan talked about really spoke to folks.
And Mindy, our donor choose.
And funding all of our donors choose requests for teachers. Thank you, Michelle. I should have had you present, Michelle.
Great, thank you, Mindy and Michelle. Weston?
Many of the great ideas from our group, similar to those of others already shared. The one I would highlight that I haven't heard yet is maybe a specific item related to the facilities or some of the opportunity to improve the audio in classrooms. One of the group members is a substitute teacher for IPS and has referenced some of the microphone systems that exist. So just looking at the investment in microphone systems and how those handhelds versus other systems that may follow you as a teacher, and then just why that is important is just the kid or the student that is in the back of the classroom who can't hear, that may lose focus, might lose attention. The improved focus, the improved retaining of interest in the increased engagement, we believe would focus in on the students' achievement increasing. So that's one we wanted to highlight.
All right, thanks, Weston. And Fumier.
Hi, good afternoon. Our team had actually increasing engagement was the common theme, but in two different buckets. First was to increase student engagement. So the idea was to increase integration and utilization of social emotional learning strategies and programs. And this was specifically targeted for high school space. That was shared from one of the participants, Eric. And in terms of the timeline, first talk to students and teachers and do the survey in the fall to start working on. And the other engagement piece was more to do with families engagement side. And we talked about expanding family support in areas of mental health services in school that might include families, and also language services, because our families are very diverse. And also, there was an idea on maybe developing some sort of teacher home visit programs to get to know families firsthand, how students' home environments are, then also to increase and build relationships between teachers and families and students. So engagement was the big piece for us. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Fumie. And so we have a few minutes here, so I'm going to summarize a little bit of what I heard, and then maybe leave a little bit of space if there's anything burning that wasn't said that you just really want to make sure the group hears about. We can definitely leave some space for that before we close out. So I heard a lot about SEL or social emotional learning and mental health support, not only for students but for teachers and staff and families. And so definitely tracked that. Heard a lot about sustainability, and then also some support maybe for specific ninth graders, and then maybe how we might scale that. And then I think Lindsay sharing a very interesting idea about providing staff and teachers with at each school with kind of a grant process for a block of money to utilize what might be best in their school community. And then Mindy heard about your group scale and racial equity work, math tutoring, which is something that's in the works, which was great to hear that. Donors Choose, and fulfilling some of that. Weston, a lot of what had been discussed, but maybe improving some audio in classrooms, which may be a different idea that hadn't been discussed yet. So thanks for sharing that. And then Fumie, focusing on student and family engagement. And so we tracked all of that. Again, thank you for following along. Hopefully those note catchers were helpful. So we're going to track all of that behind the scenes. Commissioner Hawkins will talk a little bit about kind of a next step there, but just wanted to leave a little bit of space. Is there anything that's burning for you, just to the whole group, that you might just want to share out as we have an extra minute here before we need to transition?
I had a question. So I know I missed a little bit of the beginning of the meeting, so I'm not sure if you discussed this already, but I know that there were already like some pretty serious cuts going on at IPS schools before, this past end of the school year. Is there any, I was going to wonder if there's any way that you could allocate some of this money to, as well as doing all the really amazing programs I've heard proposed, restoring some of the cuts, whether that's to the number of positions open at schools or whether that's to, like journalism program at Shortridge or whatever I know had some problems. So I would be curious to see just if, we can, because I'm all for all these great, programs, but also to make sure we keep up what we had before.
Great question, and thanks for tracking that. So I've got that down. So we'll follow up on that. So thanks for sharing. About 30 seconds. Anything else that's burning before we transition and close for Commissioner Hawkins to close us out here?
Hi, my name is Christina Smith. I have 2 students in IPS. I would really like to see the district not forget about students that maybe aren't behind grade level, but have also had learning loss compared to what they would have experienced. I know that there is always a lot of focus on students that are behind grade level, and for good reason, but we need to remember that all students have had learning loss, not just students that are below grade level.
Great. Ms. Smith, thank you. Track that. So yeah, learning acceleration for all students, definitely. All right, so I will turn it back over to Commissioner Hawkins. Let me get my screen shared again here, who I think will talk about a few next steps and close us out. So
Great, thank you, Andrew. And again, I want to thank just everyone for the dynamic conversations. Certainly appreciate the time that I had in my small group, but the readout and the feedback from all the different groups is phenomenal. So thank you for giving and sharing some of your time this afternoon for this process. So I would just kind of remind, another housekeeping on the way out of the door notice here is just that to make sure that I would ask that everyone please turn in their electronic ESSER note catchers. I think you just simply have to click the submit button, and I think that all goes somewhere into the IPS cloud for that continued aggregation of data as these conversations happen. But do want to make sure that everyone knows that the data incorporated to these note catchers are part of the foundational planning for how we think about this going forward, and your input's invaluable, and we look forward to an update from the administration to the board during the June 24th board meeting. So we're very excited about that. So as we continue to be transparent in the process, we will soon add an ESSER tracker to the website at myips.org. On that site, the tracker will track not only just district spending, but also that will be updated on a quarterly basis. So we're really excited about that. as we continue to just sort of make sure that we're very clear and precise, and our community has access to be able to see how those dollars are being allocated. So we're incredibly excited about that. And so last but not least, again, I just want to thank each and every one of you for your participation this evening. I want to thank parents. We have one of our recent grads from Shortridge. Appreciate him being present. That's incredible. And thank also Commissioner Pritchard, as well as our team, our administrative team here at IPS for helping put this together. So we're just incredibly thankful. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon.